Hello and welcome to Inside Music Curation. We're the team at Feed Media Group. We're here about once a month to talk all things music curation. And today, wanted to dive into the topic of listening like a curator. When surrounded by these experts here, Stens, Mike, Claire, Juan, thanks for joining us today. Lots of conversations come up around the water cooler here at Feed Media Group. We've got plenty of channels to talk about new music coming through. And as we head into summer with Memorial Day weekend behind us, lots of chat about kind of songs of the summer are popping up, and just really wanted to dive into how you guys approach listening to music, both as a professional curator, as a fan, looking for trends. And that I would, kind of touch on a subject we've talked about briefly before, which is, music discovery, and get a sense of where you guys are hearing new music these days, and how your experience with that music is affected by your day job. Anyone want to kick us off? Claire?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've been doing music curation in an online capacity professionally for the better part of 12 years at this point, and so it's a really interesting way to see how sort of like the full shift to streaming has changed music consumption and production, and sort of the trends you hear both in the music and how it's marketed and consumed. I think that's one of the most interesting things is being able to see how all of those factors play together. And, I think for a while there was sort of like a de-emphasis on the album as like a whole, and you had like a lot of they're just singles because people now can buy single tracks, and then you move into there's all those sort of just boom and bust cycles of people sort of like then revolting against certain things, and and then streaming just making a lot more genres available to people to listen to experimentally with minimal financial investment. So then I think that's why we get to see a lot of sort of what we have talked about here as like a post-genre pop, and a lot of different influences making their way into mainstream sound, in addition to sort of making more room for music from other countries, like Latin and K-pop also being able to make their way in to that. So that's always like my favorite part of like a from an anthropological standpoint of what's going on in music.
Awesome. Stens, what's music discovery looking like for you these days?
Well, to dovetail on what Claire said, I think anthropological is a great way of summarizing it. Another way, which is kind of two sides of a coin, is that I've always had this passion for how music is connected, and that all music is connected. I have a classical background, and so, at least as far as Western music, it all goes back to a long, long, long time ago. And there's a lot more connectivity between seemingly different music than we might realize. And so it's fun, as Claire mentioned, to see more Latin music coming in, to see more K-pop, to see Afro beats, and to see just the sheer diversity of music that's out there. We have to be ruthless editors, right? Of like, there's just so much volume coming at us that we have to find ways to kind of manage it. It's like a blessing and a curse, and it's mostly a blessing because there's so much incredible music and it's all available right now. But I think the role of curator is increasingly important because, having some kind of selection, even if you're not an obsessive music listener, you can kind of get choice paralysis when you sit down, just because even if you have a streaming app, it's like, what do I listen to now? Which is the reason that there's like New Music Friday or all these, Pop Rising, like these playlists that people gravitate towards, is just because there is that choice paralysis. And we're here to help kind of solve for that, right? So we can go deep into the madness and try to help you with those selections and do that with a lot of integrity. The last thing I'll just say really quickly, and before I hand it off to Mike or Juan, is that being a music curator, I don't know if Claire or anyone would agree with this, has kind of justified my madness, because I've always been like crazy obsessed about music to the point where no matter what's happening around me, I'm very aurally oriented, and kind of it's justified that tendency of me to like want to Shazam, or like, what is that? I need to know what that is, and who recorded that and stuff. And it's like this incredibly blissful, small little professional role that I can play and that justifies my madness, right? Whereas otherwise I'm just kind of like the randomly music obsessed dude at his kid's soccer game. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, here I can actually, there's a utility for this in this small little rarefied space.
Juan,
Anyways.
what is your madness look like? What is your engagement with music, both as a curator, obviously being a musician, enjoying musician? How do you balance all of those different touch points with music?
It's tough. Feels like Brittany Murphy in that one movie, I forget, what was it, Girl Interrupted. Well, no, I mean, there are a lot of sides to the cube in which I look at it. But I think that when I came to Feed, right, it's, and one of the things I actually really would love to talk about is the fact that the team has so many different tranches in which they're so strong in, right? And like the tranche in which I felt like I had like an eye in, right? And it kind of like complements everyone else, is that I'm a lover of live music. I'm actually, I would say, a fan of live music more than I'm a fan of bands or artists, because I really appreciate the art form, the dexterity, the composition. I love it, right? And so in that, there's a lot of really cool industry caveats that you can get, yes, I am a musician. Yes, I play metal, but right, like a lot of my friends work at like the Wiltern, at the Palladium, and at the SoFi, and we get to like gossip basically on like, who sold the most in this room, and we get into little debates and whatnot. And I think that whole thing, right, of kind of being connected into your community or, what you're involved in, becomes very important, right? I'm sure, some people would like call radio promoters or have friends in those types of situations. So for me in the curation here at Feed, live music is a big proponent in that, because it really helps me and helps me see kind of like how people are actually interacting with that music. And also a cool thing, and I could talk days about this, right? Because streaming and live music really work hand in hand, right? It's like when you see these amazing streaming numbers and like, it's like, oh, wow, this TikTok artist, right? They're like so amazing, millions of streams. You go to their show, ain't nobody at that show, right? But then you see someone those streams are just growing gradually, right? And you see those numbers develop. And then you go to their show and it's like a full sold out show at the Fonda, and it's that type of data, that type of like look or perspective that really puts like us as a whole team at the forefront of all this.
That's a really, really interesting perspective on, as a professional music curator, you guys are selecting music for our customers who have end users that are engaging in a variety of different ways, whether it's fitness or not. And so I love the idea of using that experience from a live audience and seeing how an audience is engaging with them and helping that, inform your process as you're selecting music for these different use cases. And Mike, I know, you've got a lot of different touch points in music as well. What is listening to music like for Mike Savage, and how are you approaching things, both maybe from like things that you're going out looking for versus things that are just, naturally coming your way?
I think I've always been sort of a new music discovery junkie. I mean, ever since I was a kid, and it's certainly helped me throughout my career. Even better with Feed, because I get paid to discover new music, right? But yeah, I mean, the main places I look for music, basically, in no particular order here, TikTok. I spend way too much time on TikTok for a grown man. Spotify, certain editorial playlists I go to pretty regularly to see what they add in there, because the folks over there, the curators on that team, are very smart, and you know, they're doing their job well. The folks at Sirius XM, certain stations, you know, play music that I'm using a lot in my you know, curation, you know, at Feed. So it's always good to see what they're championing. And then I also look at the media base radio charts too, right? I mean, you know, it's sort of like I look less at the Billboard charts and more at the media based radio charts, only because I feel like, you know, the radio chart's a little bit more pure in terms of like how many times a track is getting played and potentially heard by the masses. So I feel like that's a good gauge of what is going to be, you know, familiar to a potential, you know, customer of one of our clients. And then, you know, I can't forget just kind of being out in the world, right? I mean, I'm Shazamming stuff all day and all week long. You know, when I'm in a supermarket or a, you know, a store in a mall, or even in my car, I'll be Shazamming stuff.
Yeah, a hazard of the, is it a hazard of the job to constantly be, you know, picking out the music in other situations?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it can be distracting and make you feel like you have all of a sudden are like in a work brain mode instead of just enjoying the moment. So yeah, we do sort of talk about there is kind of a quote unquote dark side to so much of your brain being oriented in that way. But at the same time, I know for me, like seeing like the cultural moments that occur with music, and I think something we see even more so lately of like, you know, older songs getting new traction because of like, you know, a sync placement in movie or TV, I think is sort of like a part of, you know, the education of like people in a culture, getting to experience that music and having memories associated with it. And so it's fun to be a part of the discovery process in that way. But to be able to do that, you also have to know what is going to feel familiar to people, because that's what they will naturally gravitate to, and then sort of like slowly absorb the other stuff too.
Yeah, familiarity plays a huge role. And I think, you know, a shifting culture, right? Like there was a time when we had much fewer choices, to your point, Stens, right? And so it was more common that you were listening to the same thing as your neighbor. Now, with so many choices, with so many channels, with so many different, you know, ways to access music, having those cultural moments that really, you know, bring songs and artists to the front, you know, create those little moments. What is it like curating outside of your taste? You know, Juan, you touched on, you know, you play in a metal band, but obviously curate with a lot of different types of music. How do you, you know, take a subjective approach to some stations or to certain types of music to elicit the appropriate response?
This is a great question. For me, like I'm able to separate as much as possible, only because I have to learn, like, you know, cover tunes of, like, you know, I don't know, Jethro Tull or things of that nature. I'm not a big Jethro Tull fan, but I'll learn the songs, right? And in the same way, like I'll listen to you know, some of these artists that we program, and are they my favorite? Absolutely not. You know, and do I think they're, you know, amazing? No, but what I recognize is the impact that artist and or entity has with the brand, or, you know, with what's around it. And I think that us as curators, as a team, like we really are able to see that and then bring that to our customer, which I think is like to Claire's point, it's valuable to be able to not only excite the ear with like new music, but also like cultural specific music.
Yes, Stens, you want to speak to that?
Well, I think, you know, we all have to be very stylistically flexible, right? We curate to taste, and in that respect, we follow while we gently lead. And what I mean by that is, there's going to be in a pop station that I program, maybe, 4 or 5 songs that really kind of have to be in there at any moment in time, if you will, right? To be a kind of like straight down the middle pop station. But then around the edges of that, I can maybe put in a couple tracks that are stylistically appropriate, but not as well known, that I've somehow discovered. And I'm like, ooh, I really like this. And so I can kind of play some kind of quiet advocacy for some maybe lesser known artists or lesser known songs. I mean, I think all of us, to various extents, and we need this many antenna. We need minimally the 4 of us, the 5 of us. Like there's just too much out there. And so our own antennas with our own tastes and preferences are going to catch these, and then we can share with one another. We do have to be, though, really mindful ultimately of, like, if I'm matching your taste when you're listening, boom, mission accomplished, right? If I do that with, that Beyonce banger, with that Dua Lipa banger, with that Billie Eilish banger, that's great. If I do that with this other, Chappell Roan song or something that you don't yet know, that's great too. Like, ultimately, it's not going to win any more or less points with you, but it's gratifying that I can, I'm not just an order taker, right? Like, I do get to use some of my own tastes and preferences in that and drizzle it in. And one more thing on that kind of topic is that when I have the opportunity to curate to taste, if I will, of like, oh, there's a throwback hip hop station, I get to curate that, like, oh, yummy. Or if I get to sometimes curate like a classical station, like, that's yummy. That's like a bonus, right? I'm not always going to be able to do that, but then I can like really dive really deep down into something that, from a standpoint of what the end user wants and where I have maybe deeper expertise. And I think all of us have like places where we're relatively more shallow or deep, but we can swim in any currents at this point.
Yeah. And are there specific things that you guys are listening for? Again, we curate for a lot of fitness brands. Are there questions that you're asking yourself when you're listening, to figure out where that song might fit?
I think one of the things that we need to, point out too, is that it's not necessarily just a one-way street. I mean, we're having a lot of dialogue with our clients. So I love being able to, jump on a Zoom call with, one of our fitness clients and say, look, all right, who are your customers? What are they, what are their demographics? Where do they live? What are they doing, when they're not, using your app? And that sort of paints a picture of like, okay, I keep that person or those people in mind when I'm choosing the music for, because a throwback hip hop station for a fitness partner whose demographic is very young is going to be a lot different than the throwback hip hop station for a client whose users are older, right? Very different things. You have to keep that in mind as you're curating their material.
Yeah. To Mike's point, it's interesting. Sometimes you get it wrong. Sometimes the client will come in and have their own specific wants for, genres that they want in their stations. And then over time we find out, hey, those don't work. Right. And I think that what's most important about our job is like, we do represent the client, right, as the brand, but we also are kind of like the voice of the end user, right? With the likes, the dislikes, the skips, we're representing their taste as well. And to marriage those two is one of my favorite things about this job.
That's great. Well, I feel like I've peeled back the onion a little bit on what's going on behind the scenes for you guys. So putting it kind of into play, what are the trends this summer? What are the songs? What's everybody listening to or going to be listening to? What's the shift happening as the seasons change?
Well, I'll go. I think this has been for not even being halfway through the year yet, the amount of new music and new albums that have been released in the last couple months is kind of insane from just a quality level. So I think this is going to be sort of like one of the bigger years where it's sort of hard maybe to pinpoint one singular song in the same way. I think that, there's going to be a lot, fighting for attention and airwave time and whatnot. And I think that's really exciting. Sort of a continuation of a lot of like pop crossover stuff with, and sort of harder to classify. I'd put, the Tommy Richmond $1 Million Baby in that category of has a lot of different elements going. I think, there's definitely people are talking about different sort of like country influences on various different genres as well. So, Post Malone has his collaboration with Morgan Wallen. Shabuzi getting some traction after being featured with Beyonce. So I think like all of that sort of, there's just even more and more sort of like opening up of like what's considered mainstream, the different sounds, which is exciting.
Yeah, it's been already a banner year for pop, right? I mean, we've had the new Beyonce album is just tremendous. I thought Ariana Grande's album is amazing and it's getting a lot of airplay. We had a whole separate Inside Music Curation about her album. And then like right piled on top of each other, we got Billie Eilish and Dua Lipa. And I know there are others out there that I'm not even mentioning. That's just kind of like the peak of Taylor Swift, geez, So it's been a ton of really, and that's just more in the kind of pop space, right? So it's been interesting seeing kind of that blender of those like marquee artists get mixed in with some of the newer ones like Sabrina Carpenter, and then with some of these TikTok upstarts like $1 Million Baby. All of a sudden, my son hipped me to that. It's like he's 10. I'm like, oh my God, who the heck's this guy? And he's like, he knows his name and stuff. So I've infected my son. He's mad now too. He pays attention to all the names and the titles. It's exciting and fun just to see how it all sifts out. I don't want to let Claire off the hook though. Claire, do you have any specific songs that you're feeling like these are maybe song of the summer contenders at this point?
I mean, I think Espresso was the early lead for sure. I think that's only gonna keep getting some solid airplay and just there's all sorts of good little one-liner lyrics in there that I think people have attached to, so that's kind of fun. I'd like to see a more like, I'm curious if and what they'll push next from Beyonce. I hope it's Yaya in like a radio edit format. I think that the intro is a little long in the beginning, but I think like that's just like a really fun energy, really shows off her voice. I like that Hozier has made a fun sort of resurgence 10 years after sort of his big breakthrough, and Too Sweet is looking also to be a big one as well. So, and then even for someone who is, not a deep hip hop fan, but I'm liking Kendrick Lamar's "Not Like Us." Also, it's got a fun beat behind it. So lots of good stuff.
Mike, what are you listening to this summer?
You ready? I want you to write it down because it's not out yet, but it's out in certain places, not commercially available yet. It's by a group of Irish children between the ages of 9 and 12. They're called the Cabin Crew and the Lisdon Varna Crew, and the song is called "The Spark," and it's going to be your favorite song of the summer.
Heard it here first.
That's right.
Mike Savage, ear to the ground always. What gives it that special?
It's little Irish kids yelling over drum and bass. It's awesome.
This did bubble up to me also on the internet. Yeah.
I am learning about a new artist live with Mike Savage right now, and I have no doubt that this is going to be a banger. because Mike says so. And
Capital B.
It sounds like sea shanties round 2 of like, or not actually sounds like, but like the level of niche is sea shanty level. So of a couple years ago.
what are you feeling, Juan? And it doesn't have to be a song of the summer. Maybe hip us to some of the amazing other game that you're listening to and programming, you know?
Since 2005, it's been 50 Cent's In the Club. So, I mean, what's wonderful is that I have a song every year right when I need it. But to say a song of the summer, it's not a song I'm yet able to program. However, this band I'm super proud of, right? I've been watching this band grow for the last 10 years from like a legit small DIY like skateboard shop. So I saw them like a couple weeks ago play at Sick New World Fest in front of maybe like 3,000-4,000 people. They released a record 2 weeks ago, and the single is called Suffocate, and it features a artist by the name of Poppy, who is pretty much kind of like an alt pop artist, and the band's called Knock Loose. It's not many times that we get to see bands of this nature make it to the echelons of where they're at right now. And what's really cool right now is they're the number 1 new artist. They are, I think, number 25 in virality on Spotify. Taylor Swift is 35. So I think that, and that's not throwing shade at Taylor, right? That's showing that Taylor is the standard. And here we go with a hardcore metal band that's pushing the way that the youth is listening to music currently. In that song Suffocate, I have to say, they have the heaviest dembow reggaeton beat I've ever heard in the entirety of my life. It is one of the most exhilarating sonic experiences. To see it live was fantastic. But again, you know, one of the things that I love about these kids is that they're really pushing the boundaries. They're really mixing things up together. And it's a really cool time to listen to music right now. So to all the songs of the summer, right?
Awesome. Well, you heard it here first. Some new music, some trends that we're seeing, artists that we know and love coming back around for more. As any summer, there's going to be lots of music associated with all the activities, and hopefully creating new memories, giving us a new nostalgia for the time of the year. Great to peel back the onion a little bit every time, is what we do here on Inside Music Curation. So really fun to learn more about what it's like being a professional music curator, and how that affects both your working music life and your personal music life. So thank you guys. Thank you for, you know, peeling back the curtain and showing us some of the wizardry that happens, and always sharing your expertise and your opinions to help us get great music. So thank you, music curators. Always a pleasure. Thank you for tuning in. If you're watching live, you know, drop your favorite songs of the summer or your summer predictions in the comments. We want to hear what you guys have to say. And yeah, rock on. Here we go. Keep on listening.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.